gavel, but I think I'm going to call this meeting to order officially with a knock on the table. So apparently we have a quorum. We have 3 people who are board members sitting in this room, and then we have 2 others, Mayor Voss and Supervisor Lossenringer, who are online. And that is a quorum. So we will call this meeting to order. It is March 11th, 2022, exactly at 8. And this is the Executive Committee at Sandag. So before we begin, I'd like to ask our interpreter, Carlos, to walk through how to access our interpretation services for today's meeting.
Good morning, Chair. I will begin with the instructions in Spanish and I will be back with the instructions in English. Muy buenos días. Se está ofreciendo servicio de interpretación para esta sesión. Si nos acompaña vía Zoom en equipo de cómputo, por favor desplácese a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen sus controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, parece un globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish o Español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, en celular, tableta, etcétera, presione primero los puntos suspensivos o más, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Por último, si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio o silenciar audio original. Si nos acompaña presencialmente en la sala y necesita interpretación al español, por favor diríjase a la recepción del 7º piso y solicite un receptor. El receptor parece un pequeño iPod y se puede usar para escuchar la reunión en español. Simplemente sostenga el auricular junto a su oído y la interpretación comenzará automáticamente. Once again, interpretation is being provided to and from Spanish. To use the feature in person, please scroll on Zoom, scroll down to the bottom of your Zoom screen where the meeting controls are, then click on the interpretation icon, looks like a little world, and then select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app on a cell phone, tablet, or other mobile device, first press more, the 3 dots, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, if you are joining us in person today, in the event that there are Spanish comments and you need them interpreted into English, please check out a headset from the receptionist on the 7th floor. The headset looks like a little iPod and comes with an earpiece, which you can use to hear the meeting in English. Simply hold the earpiece to your ear and the interpreter will come on automatically. Thank you very much. That concludes this announcement.
Well, thank you, Carlos. I'm just going to announce a little bit about how this meeting will work. And we will actually do the pledge in the next meeting. So we don't, you can leave the flag up though. We always like to see it. But just as a reminder. So this is our first meeting in 2 years back in person. The last time we were in this board room was February 28th, 2 years ago. So this is really exciting to see so many of you here. It's funny because we have a lot of staff in the room and we just have 3 board members. So welcome to all the staff who are here and to the board members. We have Mayor Minto and Mayor Gloria and me who are in person for this executive committee meeting. And just so everyone knows, these 2 microphones that are right here in the middle of the room are really sensitive and pick up all sorts of side conversations. So be aware that it's basically a hot mic at all times. So you might forget that, but this is how the public can hear us, and Carlos could hear us and was speaking to us. So this is a really high-tech solution that Sandag has put in. And Mayor Sotelo Solis is walking in. We're excited to see everybody. Good morning. So what we will do when we're taking comments is we'll take in-person public comments, followed by virtual public comments, and then we'll take in-person member comments, followed by virtual member comments. And this is obviously to create a sense of order. So if you are a member of the public who's currently in this room, please submit a speaker slip to the clerk, who is right over there. Francesca, if you want to break a big hand, just in case anyone wants to do that. And then if they want to make a public comment and they are virtual, they will be raising their hand virtually and you'll call on them then. So please raise your hand basically for a virtual comment there. Okay, and then before I open up, or actually, and now we will go to those public comments. So let's go ahead, Francesca, and you can call on public comments.
Thank you, Chair. We don't have any in-person speakers this morning, but we do have one member of the public virtually. Catherine Rhodes, you are self-muted at the moment. You can go ahead when you're ready. You'll have 3 minutes.
Wonderful. This is Catherine Rhodes. Yesterday, I sent an email to the clerk with a video that I wanted to show during this meeting and then also for the next Board of Directors meeting. So at the board of directors, if you could show that video. And basically what the video is a wonderful example of cut and cover bottom-up method for trenching for a railway project in Qatar. And what it shows is, before when you said you were going to do the central mobility hub, you're going to have an elevated roadway to the airport. And one of my comments is, everything should be underground, of course, specifically by the corner of Pacific Highway and Laurel Street, because you can't have any type of elevated railway right there. It would be not good for, planes and stuff like that. And so what this is actually a very simple method where you use slurry walls to create a base so that you could do a lot of work underground. And what it is, it's a, one of the comments for my idea or the La Playa plan of a full tidal reclamation, that it would cost too much money to do, but it actually doesn't. This is actually a very cheap way, or very inexpensive way, to get everything that you want. It doesn't cost that much money. And one good part of it, the best part of it, it doesn't impact the right of way or the above levels for a prolonged period of time. In fact, most of the work is done underground and will actually not mess with the traffic circulation. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that I saw that on the Port of San Diego closed session that you guys are in negotiations for the port headquarters, and I'm not sure, about maybe 20 acres or so from the airport through Pacific Highway all the way to the train tracks. It's perfect. Thank you so much for asking for this property. The one thing is, I don't think that you should give the Port of San Diego any money for the property, because the property is not owned by the port. Every time I used to go to the port staff would try to tell me that they own the tidelands. And I would say, no, the people of the state of California own the tidelands. You're just, the trustees for us. And so when you're negotiating the price, please try to pay them close to $0, because it's not their public land to make money off of. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. That concludes the public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'd just like to announce that the executive committee members who are virtual, who are here, because we actually can't see you on the screen, so I just want to announce it, are Mayor Voss, Mayor Jones, Supervisor Anderson, Mayor Salas, and we also have Mayor Bailey here, who's a non-EC member. And then we have in person, Mayor Blakespear-Mead, Mayor Gloria, Mayor Mento, and Mayor Sotelo-Solis. So now we will call on any board members who would like to make comments. Anybody in person? I don't see your hands up. So what about our virtual board members?
I don't see any hands.
Okay, thank you. And what about Mayor Bailey?
Mayor Bailey does have his hand up now.
Okay, let's call on Mayor Bailey.
Mayor Bailey, you're self-muted at the moment. You can go ahead when you're ready.
Terrific. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Executive Board. On March 2nd, I sent an email to the Chair requesting an item be brought to the Executive Committee for consideration on agendizing for the full board. That requested item is the contemplated new local sales tax in the recently adopted 2021 Sandag Regional Plan. Specifically, I believe the agenda item should provide the board with a comprehensive information regarding projected revenue by year from the new sales tax, the underlying assumptions that the revenue projections were based on. And additionally, the item should be provided in a timely manner to give the board the option for whether or not to place the sales tax measure on the November 2022 ballot. Since this request is not on the executive committee agenda for today, I would like to ask the executive director when the request will come before either the executive committee or the full board.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Bailey. Is that the end of your comment?
It is, yes.
Okay, thank you. So just to address your comment directly, so The leadership has been speaking with the Sandag staff about your request. And we know that the regional plan includes an assumption about a sales tax measure in 2022, which is this year. But we also know that there is already a citizens initiative, which is on the ballot and being handled independent of this agency by Sandag. And the regional plan does not specify which agency or which group would have a sales tax initiative that would come forward. So at this point, there's no need to agendize any action by the board on this topic. Because basically Sandag will not be taking an action on that topic, so there's no need to have an agenda item about it. So that's to directly answer the question of why it's not on a future agenda item, that's why.
So Chair, if I may, is it, should be my understanding then that there is no plan for the executive director to bring an item in front of the executive committee concerning an anticipated sales tax increase?
That is right.
So if I may, I'm curious, has any staff member of Sandag had any interaction with the proponents of the initiative?
I'll ask our executive director to answer.
Absolutely not. Legally not allowed. We have no desire. It's an initiative, what it's called, citizen initiative. But as I told the board much earlier, we are not involved. We won't be involved. We can't be involved. But we welcome anybody who brings funding to this meeting to move the infrastructure.
And so if there's been no interactions with the proponents of the initiative, do we know of their progress?
No, sir, I do not. But I'm sure if you would ask the organizer, they will be able to tell you.
And so if we don't know of their progress, do we know what the chances are this initiative actually qualifies for the ballot in November?
I wouldn't know, sir. I have no idea. Frankly, I don't know what the qualification threshold is. Where are they in the process? But again, I'm sure you can contact them directly.
And just two more questions, Chair, if I may. And so if Sandag staff has stated, like through the RTP, that this increase in the sales tax is absolutely paramount to the success of the regional transportation plan, it seems like we're relying on an organization to put an initiative on the ballot that we have no interaction with. We have no idea what their status is. So we have no idea of what the likelihood of actually this initiative qualifying for the ballot measure is. I just want to make sure I'm understanding that correctly, that we're essentially relying on another organization to bring this initiative forward.
Yeah, as we indicated in the regional transportation plan, we talked about 3 sales tax measures. We have not talked who does it. Is it MTS, CPD, citizen initiative? Of course, we're not in control here. We don't know whether it passes or not. If it doesn't, the board will be the first to be talked to about where we're gonna go forward with the plan, how we're gonna fund the plan. As you know, man, I think we said this before. This plan is not worth anything unless we fund it. So at one point, if this citizen initiative doesn't pass and the money doesn't come through, we'll be discussing with you how to move forward.
So then we are then relying on an outside agency or citizens group to bring forward an initiative that we do not have any interaction with. That's what I hear you saying.
As I said, we welcome any entity that brings funding to move the infrastructure forward.
Except Sandag.
Well, at one point, maybe Sandag will, but we haven't got to the board yet.
Well, and that's actually, that was the purpose of my agenda item request. I mean, pursuant to the Sandag Board Policy 1, subsection 3.11, I, as a board member, have the right to request the executive committee agendize an item. I believe, as the policy is written, that request to the chair must be brought to the executive committee. So I, once again, I'm pretty adamant that the executive committee should hear this request and vote up or down whether or not to agendize this item for the full board.
The attorney want to weigh in?
Absolutely. Mayor Bailey, under section 3.1.1, which you correctly point to, any board member requesting that an item be considered for inclusion on an agenda can bring that request forward in writing. I believe that you've done that, but that is just to be considered for inclusion. There is an item on today's agenda that that proposes future board agendas to be set. And as a part of that, you could certainly make a request that something be either added or taken away from that agenda. Since you're not, I don't believe you're a voting member here today, another member that is a voting member could make that as perhaps a substitute motion, and that would be a proper way to have that considered by this body. But no individual member can compel that any one item be included in an agenda.
Fair enough.
Okay, well, thank you. I see Mayor Jones's hand is also up. Thank you, Mayor Bailey. We'll go ahead and call on her.
Thank you. I also concur with Mayor Bailey, in the efforts of transparency for the organization. I think it's very important that we allow to vote on something like this and have the options. And when we're talking about not having our organization in control of this, when it's our plan, I just don't understand how we can actually justify this as board members. We are out here as representatives of our residents, and I just don't understand how we can justify not agendizing this and allowing the full board to talk about this and hear all voices from all of the cities. We have 19 agencies that we have represented at our board meetings, and to have only and just to not listen to that and not have that available, and one board member, I don't know, it doesn't matter if there are more than one board member that are requesting this, because I would request this as well.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Jones.
Maybe Hassan could answer that. Is it, or possibly our city attorney, or our attorney, Mr. Kirk, because if it requires just more board members asking for this and requesting this, I'm sure that many of the board members would want to have a voice and have this option put on the ballot.
Let's have the Mr. Kirk go over again the procedure that he's shared with Mayor Bailey.
I think the only thing that I would add that would be responsive to Mayor Jones would be that the requirement that the executive committee consider an item for inclusion is that any board member make that request, whether that's one board member or 10 board members that make the request. That's enough to trigger your consideration of it. Again, any member of the executive committee in carrying forward that request may move that an item then be, when an agenda comes before the executive committee for approval, any member of the executive committee may then move that an item be added to or subtracted from that agenda as a part of the motion to approve that agenda. Again, it doesn't matter how many members of the board make that request.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Lawson Reamer, did you have your hand up?
I did. I mean, I just thought I wanted to ask or comment that it seemed that that Rebecca Jones seemed very uncomfortable with the idea that our regional transportation plan is relying on a measure that we have no control over, which we obviously don't, since it's a citizens initiative. So it sounded to me like she's suggesting that we as Sandag should bring the measure ourselves. I'm not sure if that's what she was suggesting, but that seemed like the only logical way of understanding her comments.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Minto would like to comment.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a two-edged sword here. I think it's good that we, in some ways, stay in the background. But like in my city, what we do is when we have discussions about citizens initiatives coming forward, we always take a look at them to make sure that it's the right kind of initiative. Because if there's things in there that are going to cause harm or preclude us from accomplishing the mission of the city, we will entertain ideas of putting competing initiatives on the ballot, or creating an ordinance, city ordinance, that would already be in place to mitigate any issues. And I think that's really kind of what we should be doing here. I don't think that we have to meddle, for instance, in whatever's going on out there, but I think that it would be important for our legislative team here to look at what's going on and find out, is there something in that could be harmful, something that is very distasteful for most of the people that might, be involved in this. And if it's not, then I think we would just let it go ahead
they want to do it. Because quite frankly, I think we should allow somebody else to spend the money if it's gonna be the right thing for us.
Right. I think that's a great point about how cities work. And it is, I mean, our legislative team should do an analysis, and maybe as part of the executive director's report, he can report on what our legislative analysis is.
But that should be done sooner than later, because I think Mayor Bailey has a good point. We should be on top of this.
Yeah, so you're all making great points. I'm gonna rely on our chief counsel to say whether legally even our staff can. And if they do, yes, I think we have to be careful, because I respectfully say, this is governed by state law, and we're not San Diego is not the only region that has its initial. There's about 20, 30 of them. Actually, in Southern California, there's 3, there's Ventura, Riverside, etc. So if the lawyers tell me our staff can do legal analysis legally, we'll all for it, but I'm gonna wait to see whether that's possible for us to get involved.
There is absolutely a line of how staff can be involved in an outside ballot measure, and that the scrutiny of that is heightened during a signature gathering phase and during the course of the election, which I believe we would be in right now. Something that generally is allowed in that is an analysis, an impartial analysis that considers both sides of it and that looks at an agency's funding needs and whether a ballot measure would or would not address those funding needs. And it sounds like, Mayor Minto, that's what your city does. So that would be permissible for our staff to do.
If that's permissible, our staff would be more than happy to do that. But I want to make sure it's permissible and will not violate anything.
Now, do we need to vote on that, or can we just do that by direction?
I think they have the.
Okay.
Yep.
I would just say that, again, we keep it high level. It very much be this is what it is. This is how, just as if we were getting a legislative affairs update on a policy that's coming through, the state legislature, very high level. The threshold, whatever X is, that should not be where we go. Very high level. This is how, and yeah. That's the only request I would have.
We don't have to get into the weeds on it. Just make sure that we know what's happening in case we have to take some kind of action. That's a legal action.
Right. Okay, great. Well, thank you, everybody.
Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Mayor Salas was having trouble with raising her hand on Zoom, but she wanted to make a comment on this as well.
Okay, go ahead, Mayor Salas.
So gathering signatures and citizens initiatives are it's basic to our democracy. And so, that we can't control what other outside groups put on the ballot is not something unusual. I know that some people have have faced recall efforts, and we don't like that either, but it is what it is, and citizens have their right to put something on the ballot and put it together. So I think that this discussion about whether or not we approve what they're doing is useless, but I do agree that yes, we should get a basic information about the nuts and bolts of the campaign and the gathering of signatures, but I don't think that we should weigh in on whether we approve it or not. That's not our job.
Thank you, Mayor Salas. That's a good point. Okay, so I think we have some direction there, and we will move on to our consent calendar. So I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, do we have any board member comments on consent? Who are in the room? No. Do we have any board member comments who are virtual?
We do. Mayor Voss and Supervisor Anderson both have their hands up.
Okay, let's go ahead with Mayor Voss.
Good morning. I would like to make a substitute motion to include on one of those agendas the item that Mayor Bailey has requested.
Okay, thank you. That's a motion. So now I'll call on Supervisor Anderson.
I don't know if I am doing this at the correct time, but in the minutes, it reflects that I did not attend the February 11th meeting. I did, in fact. I just want to make sure that the record is reflected correctly. And this is off subject slightly. The legislature changed its policy. Every initiative, whether it's a citizen's initiative or not, goes through policy and they vote on it for the same reasons that Mayor Minto stated. So the state legislature does this on every statewide ballot. So it's not uncommon either. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm not seeing a second on that. So
I'll
we'll
second that.
Okay.
Yeah, and, but I would like to ask for clarification on exactly what the substitute motion was, because I think I understand it, but I want to make sure everybody else does.
Well, you need to ask the motion maker.
Well, that's actually what I'm doing.
Okay. Mayor Voss?
Simply to have this item on the agenda for the full board to discuss it, so we have complete transparency and we understand where we're headed and whether or not there's a need for a Sandag initiative. Really, it's just to air this out and have a conversation. It's critically important.
Believe me, we're on a consent agenda, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm not sure that does actually match this, so.
I would encourage my colleagues to read the consent agenda and understand that's what the motion is. What Mayor Voss is raising is irrelevant to the consent agenda. That discussion's already been had, and I've noticed it wasn't agendized, but we spent half an hour on it, guys. I hope my colleagues would engage themselves in the $1 billion budget more than it is on the agenda, and worthy of full discussion this morning. Let's move the consent agenda, guys.
Okay, so Mayor Minto, is your second stand or withdraw?
No, I have to withdraw because it really isn't to the consent calendar. That's why I actually wanted the clarification on that.
Okay, well, then let's go ahead and vote on the, Mayor Voss, your hand?
Yeah, if I may, it is relevant to the consent agenda because on the consent agenda, we're reviewing draft board agendas, and I'm offering a substitute motion to add that item to a draft board agenda.
Okay, I'm not seeing Mayor Mento second it or others. So
I need to think about this for a second. And you know what? I think maybe John can chime in on this because I need the clarification on, is that exact? Because if that's what's really actually the motion is, substitute motion is, and to add to the, the agenda here. So I need clarification on that.
I think the question that's before us is whether the substitute motion to add an item to the consent, to the future agenda that you're voting on is in order. I believe that it is. That is, as has been both the practice of this and has been, we've discussed earlier, it is the only way that a board member per your board policies can ask that an item be considered in an agenda. It's the only avenue for that to happen. And so based upon that, I believe that the substitute motion would be in order for your consideration of that. You can vote up or vote down on it, but it's just being put before you for consideration.
Okay, so let's go ahead and vote. There's a motion and a second on the substitute motion.
Right.
And again, for clarity's sake, the direction and the conversation that we had earlier was that it would come through the executive director presentation and an update would be provided. So it's already potentially slated for us to.
Just not one of these two agendas necessarily. We have general direction already.
Well, and also the difference is that it's an action item if it comes forward, and otherwise it's a report, it's an information item basically, which I feel comfortable with an information item, which is why I'll be voting no on the substitute motion, but of course everyone gets their vote.
Okay. Thank you.
For the city of San Diego, Vice Chair Gloria.
No.
For the county of San Diego, Supervisor Lawson Bremer.
No.
For East County, Mayor Minto.
Yes.
For North County Coastal, Chair Blakespear.
No.
For North County Inland, Mayor Voss.
Yes.
And for South County, Second Vice Chair Sotelo Solis.
No.
Thank you. And that item does not pass with 4 noes and 2 yeses.
Okay, so let's vote on the original motion now, which is the consent calendar, which has 2 items. with the change that Supervisor Anderson.
As
requested.
amended, yes. For the city of San Diego, Vice Chair Gloria.
Yes.
For the county of San Diego, Supervisor Lawson Reamer.
Yes.
For East County, Mayor Minto.
Yes.
For North County Coastal, Chair Blake Spear.
Yes.
For North County Inland, Mayor Voss.
Yes.
And for South County, Second Vice Chair Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
Thank you. And that item does pass unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Now we are on to the draft program budget, and we have, let's see. Okay. Okay, oh, yeah, okay. You're next. Yeah, I see.
Okay, thank you, Chair and Executive Committee members. Today we're here to present the draft FY23 budget. This is a $960 million budget that would cover the period of June 1st, 2020, July 1st, 2022 through June 30th of 2023. So it lays out how the budget would be spent on specific programs, projects, the administrative budget. And what we're here to do today is to provide you a little bit more detail than what we have provided in the previous meeting with you all, and to release this to our funding agencies. And I think it's really important to recognize that the funding, that much of what the funding is included in this budget comes through state and federal agencies. So we need to send it off to them to make sure that we're meeting all their requirements and all the mandates. At your last meeting, we went through the strategic initiatives that we're taking as an organization in this budget to really try to streamline our processes and procedures. We also are highlighting some of the key projects that we are undertaking as an agency. So the Otay Mesa East, the airport connection, the Del Mar Bluffs, and implementing the regional plan. So those are the kind of big picture things here. Today, Andre and Melissa are going to go through more detail on the funding. That's what Andre is going to do. And then Melissa will go through the administrative budget and the board budget. And then we'll be asking you to actually vote to accept the draft and for us to send that off to the funding agencies and making the recommendation that the board of directors at the next meeting accepts the draft as well. This really sets forward the public process so that we can start discussions about all the details that are in the budget. So with that, I'll turn it over to our CFO, Andre.
Thank you, Colleen, and good morning, everybody. So as Colleen mentioned, the budget is $960 million this year, which is a little bit short of $1 billion. Our budget has been $1 billion plus the last several years, and the main reason why it's under $1 billion this year is because of the mid-coast opening. We're spending $300 to $400 million a year on that for the last 4 or 5 years. So the budget utilizes a wide variety of funding sources. In fact, there's over 100 funding sources this year. And for our major programs, 2/3 come from state and federal sources, and the balance coming from local sources such as our TDA and transit sales tax and member agency assessment. Our budget is prepared in accordance with the FTA and FHW guidelines, which requires a submission of a draft to the funding agencies each March. And SANDAG bylaws require the draft to be considered by April 1st of each year, and the final to be approved by June 30th. So there are 3 primary components of our program budget where SANDAG directly manages the projects. First is the overall work program, or OWP, which is detailed in chapters 2 and 3. That provides an inventory of SANDAG's regional planning and data projects and programs, and has a total budget of $73.1 million. This is actually a 40% increase, or $21 million over the prior year, due to several new programs such as projects getting underway to implement the 2021 regional plan, such as the early action transit pilot, providing transit passes to youth riders, the Purple Line conceptual studies, and the regional rail infrastructure accelerator. Other newer programs include the regional housing incentive program that will help local jurisdictions meet their RENA goals, and Access for All, which will provide on-demand rides for disabled passengers. The next major component is the regional operations and services section, which is in chapter 4. And this includes all the operations related programs that we have, such as the SR 125 toll roads, the I-15 fast track managed lanes, the freeway service patrol, and the ARGIS programs and services. The total operations budget is $61.4 million, relatively flat from fiscal year 2022. The third major component is the largest two, is the capital program, which is in Chapter 9, includes a project approved part of the Transnet extension that are currently underway and other regional significant capital investments. Projected capital expenditures for fiscal year 23 are $441 million out of the total multi-year capital program, which is $8.8 billion. So in the capital program, the annual spending is decreasing by $245 million to the completion of the I-5 North Coast Corridor, and as I just mentioned, the opening of the Mid-Coast Trolley project. There are several other more projects that will be opening to the public this year, including the SR 125, 905 connectors, the HOV lanes in Carlsbad, the Pepper Canyon improvements at UCSD, that's part of the Mid-Coast project, and the Semper Viva interchange exchange at the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry. Projects in fiscal year 23 with large expenditures include $95 million in the I-5 corridors, the HOV lanes, SR 56 auxiliary lanes, and $76 million in the Coastal Rail Corridor projects, and $47 million on the bike projects. So with that, I'll turn it over to Melissa, who'll talk about our administration and board budgets and take a moment to review our personnel budget too.
Thanks so much, Andre, and it's so good to be here and see all of you today. We're back in person. I'm excited about that. So as Director of Organization Effectiveness here at Sandag, I oversee a lot of our administrative and business operations functions, and have some information to share with you this morning regarding the administration and board budgets, as well as our personnel budgets for next year. So the admin and the board budgets are part of Chapter 7 in the budget document that you've been provided. In summary, the admin and board budget's about $24 million next year, about 2.5% of that $960 million budget that Andre's been talking about. Overall, the admin expenses are increasing about 13% next year, in part some salary benefits related expenses for employees, as well as some business operational expenses, things like rent and insurance are increasing. And then other program items like parking, mileage, and travel, budgets that we've reduced in recent years due to COVID are being restored back to those pre-pandemic levels, if you will. The agency's business support teams will be heavily engaged in the strategic initiatives that Colleen mentioned earlier in the presentation, really emphasizing streamlining activities, process improvements. And one of the key projects that we're looking forward to implementing next year is our new ERP system, expected to bring efficiencies throughout the organization. So moving to the board budget, this is projected to be slightly lower in FY23 compared to the current year. Last year, there were funds included in the budget to do the upgrades to the board AV system that you'll see in just a few minutes. Those upgrades have been really important for ensuring that we can have effective hybrid meetings like we're having today, as well as ensuring that the public have meaningful opportunities to engage in our meetings. Next year's board budget includes additional funds for interpretation and language assistance services, really reflecting the agency's commitment to equity. There's also funds in the budget for board retreats. And like I said, with the admin budget, we're restoring several line items, parking, mileage, travel, et cetera, back to those pre-pandemic levels. So the personnel budget is the third item I wanted to talk to you about this morning, and it itself has three subcomponents: staffing, compensation, and benefits. So to start out on the staffing side of things, perhaps not a surprise to know that Sandag, like most employers, is experiencing the effects of the Great Resignation. Our turnover rate is a little higher than we would normally see, currently around 14%. But with that, wanted to let you know we have been successful in filling vacancies and have hired about 50 new employees since the beginning of the fiscal year, full-time employees, that is. In addition to that, one of the most effective ways that we've addressed our staffing needs has been to convert existing intern positions to full-time limited term positions. And with that, promoting some amazing, bright, talented, and very capable individuals into entry-level professional positions. Also, the reorganization that was initiated last month is yielding pretty significant results for the agency staffing program. 6 executive level positions were eliminated, repurposed, if you will, and that budget capacity has been used to fund some of those entry level professional positions that I've just mentioned through FY23. I think these two approaches are great examples of some of the streamlining and efficiency goals that management has really been focused on recently and very much aligned to our strategic plan. With the FY23 budget, we have included 405 full-time positions, and that includes 2 proposed new positions. One of those is for our Office of the Independent Auditor. And Mary is looking for an entry-level management auditor. This is a request that Mary and the audit committee have discussed and sort of is in line with a longer-term staffing plan for the auditor's office. The second new position is with our AGIS team. They're looking for a network engineer that would expand their cybersecurity and other cloud transformation initiatives. So compensation is the next item to talk about. So SANDAG relies on a pretty robust compensation program to support our efforts to attract, recruit, retain employees. And maintaining a fair and equitable compensation program is more imperative than ever, given the rising cost of living in the San Diego region, combined with other factors that are affecting turnover and the availability of qualified candidates. We conducted a salary range study in the early part of last year, and the board adopted recommendations from that study in FY22. So we're currently working with a compensation consultant to determine if there are any other recommendations to bring forward as part of the FY23 budget with respect to our salary structure. Also included in the FY23 budget, draft budget, excuse me, is a recommendation for 3% compensation adjustment pool. This would be, if approved, would be used to reward employees based on their performance and their contributions to the agency via merit increases. The 3% recommendation is consistent with market data that we gathered when we were preparing the draft budget. And again, we're going to take a look at this to make sure it still lines up with trends when we bring the draft budget to you in May. As a reminder, SANDAG uses a pay for performance model, meaning employees do not receive any kind of automatic pay increases or cost of living adjustments. Decisions to increase an employee's pay are purely based on merit and performance. And we determine or evaluate that through annual performance evaluations. And in addition to recognizing performances, merit increases do help to ensure that our employees' salaries remain competitive with the market. They also support our retention goals. Just a few final words here on the benefits budget, which is to say that there are no significant changes proposed to the benefits budget for next year. The items that are in the benefits budget are part of Chapter 11 in the budget document. And to wrap up this conversation, I'm going to turn things back to Andre to talk about our 2 Section 115 trusts and how they've been performing for us.
Thanks, Melissa. And so this is the final slide that we'll be taking a look at. So as part of the benefits budget, staff has proposed continuation of contributions to 2 of us Section 115 tax exempt trusts established as a means for saving for future pension benefits and future retiree health insurance. So this particular chart takes a closer look at our Section 115 trust. This is something that we established back in 2017 when the board decided to save for our future pension costs by accelerating the amount of monies that we're putting towards a trust. Initially, we put in 2017 $3.5 million, and we've been contributing $1 million per year. And I'm pleased to say that 5 years later, we are on track to actually pay off our pension early by 2031 as far as unfunded liability. And if we do that, we actually save about $24.7 million. In the short run, we're putting $1 million, but the benefit, the 24.7 is obviously huge. And based on where we are today, we're 79% funded, which is the highest percentage that we've had the last several years. So I just want to go through our budget meeting schedule. So pending the recommendation of the executive committee today, we'll present the budget to the board of directors in the March 25th meeting. And on May 13th, this executive committee is scheduled to hear the final proposed program budget, which will include comments that we get from the funding agencies, member agencies, and the public. And consistent with Sandag bylaws, final board approval is scheduled for May 27th of 2022. So the recommendation today is the executive committee is asked to authorize distribution of the draft fiscal year 23 program budget to member agencies and other interested parties for review and comment, and recommend that the board of directors consider the draft fiscal year 23 program budget for approval.
Let me clarify to the board members. So you're not approving the budget today. You're approving the distribution and the board.
Well, thank you for that great presentation. That prepaying of pension debt is excellent. I love seeing that chart. Saves money and is fiscally responsible. I'll call on Francesca to, if we have any public comments in person or virtual.
Thank you, Chair. We do not have any in-person public comments, and I don't see any hands virtually either.
Okay, so how about in-person or virtual member comments? Anybody here want to make a member comment? Mayor Salas has her hand up, I see.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I would like to ask to have a couple of things included in the draft budget. You know, we're looking at the 2021 regional transportation plan to be completed in 2035. So can we push for the Chula Vista rail grade separations and environmental document to be funded in fiscal year 23 with $1 million, and fiscal years 24 and 25 an additional $1 million, because we really need to get moving on these projects so we can be ready for federal funds. You know, it's important for us to be able to have all the information at hand so we can demonstrate that we're shovel ready on these projects. So that's my first request. And then the second one is on page 304, when you're talking about the regional bikeway projects listed. I would like to ask for $1 million for the environmental phase for the segment of the railroad corridor from E Street to Lagoon Drive. And the reason is that we already have permission per an agreement with MTS to use the abandoned Coronado Branch Line Railroad, and that's parallel to the East Bay. And it would be a big win for the region because it really saves money and time negotiating for easement rights, right? Because we've already got that agreement. So the sooner we can be more competitive, we can ask for more construction funds, and like most received from the active transportation program. So this is a really important commuter route, and in addition, with everything that's happening on the Bayfront, and with the RV park booming and the plans for extension, we see so much more ridership on that segment, and we need to improve more. So those are my two requests there.
Mayor Salas and committee members, I think we have some good news to report on the graded crossing. So
one of the things that happens during this public review period is we find out also about additional funding that could be coming to the region. And it's, you know, on the way to having the president's signature on $15 million that will come to the San Diego region, specifically for grade separations at the Palomar grade separation, also funding for Del Mar Bluffs, and funding as well for Bayshore Bikeway completion. So that is something that during this draft process, we're hoping to be able to add that into the budget. And so by the time we bring the final budget to you, we'll have that. So we can also look at how, you know, these are new funds coming to the region. They have to be specifically for these particular projects. But what Mayor Salas is saying is absolutely right. Everything we're trying to do in this budget is to get things shovel ready. It is many projects shovel ready, so we are ready to go for whatever funding we can find for the capital investments.
And so, like we said, Mayor Salas, the graded crossing, I think will continue to be priority now with the new funding. Just so you know. Sorry.
Well, I think that's really important and good news because, you know, as we've seen with the Mid-Coast trolley opening up, the demand for the blue line from the border on up has really increased. And what's happening is the trolleys are filling up and people are having to wait for a next trolley. So I think it's really important for, you know, the transportation system and our economic prosperity in the San Diego region.
Just so the members know, in the appropriation, we receive more than, except for the military, we receive the highest appropriation. So I'm looking forward to more funding. And just to Mayor us directly, I think by the time we finalize the budget, this could be clearer in terms of where the funding is.
Oh, and with that, Chair, I know it's 8:50. I'll move to approve item 4.
I'll second that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Let's go ahead and vote.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to note for the record that there were no hands up from the public on this item. For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair Gloria.
Aye.
For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Lawson Remer.
Aye.
For East County, Mayor Minto.
Aye.
For North County Coastal, Chair Blakespear.
Aye.
For North County Inland, Mayor Voss.
Aye.
And for South County, Second Vice Chair Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
Thank you. And that item does pass unanimously.
Okay, well, in our last 9 minutes, we have our legislative status report. So I will hand it over to Hector and Anna.
See how quickly you guys can speak.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Well, Colleen stole my thunder, but we'll get there in a minute. Good morning. I'm Anna Lowe, and I'm our Manager of Government Relations here at SANDAG. And I'm going to go ahead and give you a really quick update on state and federal legislative activities. I'm going to start with the state. And so just as everyone's aware, there's 2,100 bills that were introduced prior to the introduction deadline last month. Although we haven't made our way through all of them, we'd like to flag just a few for you that we've already identified as relevant. Senator Hueso introduced SB 985, and this is a spot bill right now, which means that there's no substance yet, but if needed, it could serve as a vehicle to make any changes we may need to deliver the Otay Mesa Port of Entry projects. We've made great progress there, and over the last couple of months, including securing CDP support, which is a really huge achievement. So now we just want to make sure that we're ready to carry out any policy changes necessary to get this project over the finish line. A couple of other spot bills Senator Hueso included, SB 1169, which Mayor Salas mentioned at our last meeting, supports the conversion of SR 125 to a toll-free road. We have SB 1105, which would establish a new housing finance authority in the San Diego region. And last on the list is AB 1833, and this was introduced by Assemblymember Ward, which would align the micro purchase and simplified acquisition threshold for SANDAG, MTS, and NCTD with those at the federal level. This is an administrative fix and one that we've really been looking for a while. It would make our thresholds consistent with the federal thresholds, and it's much in line with our agency strategic plan, and it's focused on streamlining and improving our contract and procurement activities. We'll keep you updated as other bills continue to flesh out, and we'll be back, of course, at future meetings. And now onto the feds. And this is where Colleen stole my thunder. But it's been a really great week for our region in particular. The FY 2022 Omnibus Appropriations Package was passed out of the House on Wednesday, and late last night passed the Senate. And so now we're just waiting for the president to sign. And this, let's see, scooting along here, sorry. So what does this mean to us? That's where we are. More opportunities to compete in significantly expanded grant programs, and more directly, thanks to the hard work of our congressional delegation, collectively, our region is actually slated to get over $100 million And this is for 26 different projects. And as Colleen mentioned, Sandag is slated to get over 15 million of that. And again, just very exciting and working with Andre, and we'll figure out what we need to do next. So with that, because I know we're short on time, we'll be back. We're going to keep having conversations and continuing to talk to our congressional and state or our delegation. And hopefully we'll see some of you in DC, and we'll continue these conversations. Over to Hector.
Thank you, Anna. And I'm very pleased to see you in person again after 2 years of seeing you on the screen. The only thing that I will miss now are my teleprompters I used to have when I reported to you. Now it's going to be more difficult. I'm going to give you a short version of my report, and I will talk about AB 617. It's the Assembly bill that authorized CAR to prepare community air protection program with the purpose of reducing exposure to pollution. As you remember, in 2019, the communities nearby the seaport were granted this possibility, and they approved this program in the summer of last year. In January, I mentioned that Sandag sent a letter of support to the APCD nomination for the communities along the international border, including San Isidro and Otay Mesa, to be selected and have a program like this. I'm very pleased to inform that last month, the CAR took a motion unanimously to support this nomination. So the communities will have a plan. And currently your staff is already working with APCD to join in these efforts. So that's it regarding AB 617. And things out of the border, I'm going to be also very brief. The new agency, National Agency of Mexican Customs, starting operations in Mexico. And this is very significant because it's kind of the similar situation when the United States implemented or created the Department of Homeland Security. This new agency is now a decentralized entity under the Secretary of Finance, and is going to be operated by a civilian officer, but managed and operated in ground by personnel from the Ministry of Defense, of National Defense of Mexico. That's important. The other important thing to know is that this agency managed a fund, a cash fund of about over $4.4 billion. Maybe the rate exchange is lower now, $4.2 billion. But the President of Mexico authorized to use $500 million of those to be used in some infrastructure projects south of the border, including the port of entry of Otay 2 that pairs our project of Otay Mesa East. But additionally, is also going to fund the access road on the Mexican side. That's very important because the project was planned to be a private concession. So it's no longer going to be a private, we assume it's no longer going to be a private concession because it's now fully funded. The other important thing is that the president gave instructions to the Corps engineer group of, I don't know how it's called, from the Ministry of National Defense of Mexico to start building this project with the instructions to have it open by next year, as our CEO reported to you. So you have like a precedent. El Chaparral, south of San Isidro, was built by this same group of engineers in a record time of 5 months. So it's possible that this can happen. And in the meantime, your staff is working with the Mexican counterparts to prepare a financial strategy, and our CFO is here. We will bring you a report eventually soon, so you will hear what we are doing. And with this, I conclude my report.
Okay, thank you. Quickly, Francesca, do we have public comments?
No, I don't see any hands.
Okay, any member comments?
Chair, Anna mentioned it, but I think it's worth repeating. Our congressional delegation came through for the San Diego region. I'd asked board members on all sides of the aisle to make sure we're thankful to these members who went out and hustled this money for our region. I know our city got a bunch of stuff. I'm sure all your cities got something or something close to you. So anyway, I'd like the records to reflect, the minutes to reflect that the board is extremely appreciative to our congressional delegation. And thanks to staff for delivering a lot of information in a short amount of time. I'm hopeful that we can spend more time on issues like this and rather than the foolishness that was the member comment at the beginning.
Okay, thank you for the report. We're officially adjourned, and we'll see you in the other room.